Hello and welcome to this video. I'm going to explain how I use Lightroom for merging different images of different exposure to increase the dynamic range. In the blog post that I wrote about landscape gardening, I explained that I've taken some photos at night and wanted to increase the dynamic range, so used an HDR Merge within Lightroom, and now I'm going to show you how I do that. When I'm actually photographing the scene, I don't use the bracketing on my camera, partly because I don't necessarily know how many shots I'm going to want to capture between the very brightest bit and the very darkest bit. So I do all of that side of it manually myself. I find the highlights and I'll manually expose for them, as you can see in this image on the screen here. So the highlights are now as bright as I want them. I then go through and expose it until the shadows are as light as I would like those as well, which you can see in this image here. I then take several photos in between, and I just manually change normally the shutter speed, because I don't want to change the depth of field and try and avoid upping the ISO more than I need to. So that leaves me with the shutter speed to change. All of these were taken on a tripod, so I was able to use quite long exposures. The brightest image was 5 seconds at f8 and ISO 400. The darkest image was 0.4 of a second at f8 and ISO 400. So you can see I've got a range between 0.4 of a second and 5 seconds as my shutter speed. And in this I've got 6 images that I'm going to merge together. Lightroom makes this really easy to do. So I've highlighted in red the ones that I want to use. So I click on the first one in the range, hold down the Shift key and click on the last one. Then I actually have my full 6 selected. Then I go to Photo, Photo Merge and choose HDR. And this will create a preview image for me. This can take a few minutes. The most I've done this with has been 17 images. The other thing that you can do when you're actually photographing the scene, if there is a specific area that you're interested in that you want a bit lighter and brighter, you can either take a long exposure image and light it with a torch or use flash on that particular section. And again, by using this HDR Merge, it brings all of that together really quite nicely. The HDR Merge box has a few settings. We have Auto Align, and that will do what it says on the tin and align the source images before merging as an HDR. So making sure that all the roof lines line up, all of those bits and pieces. The auto settings will show you what it would look like if you used the auto in your basic exposure panel within the Lightroom Develop module. If we take this setting off, you can see what it looks like. And one common thing that I've found when I've been talking to people is that they've said they've done this HDR Merge, but the image looked the same, so they thought it hadn't worked. But what this does, it takes all of the data from all of the images and puts it into one file. So that just expands the range of information you have from highlight to shadow. So you can adjust your image far more and still have good quality data there to use. The deghost amount will get rid of some of the artificially transparent areas that you can get when you do these HDR merges. Quite often you may find it doesn't do anything, and you should use this on as low a setting as possible. I normally leave mine set to low unless I actually notice an area of the image looking artificially transparent when it really shouldn't be. So maybe leaves on a tree that you can half see through, just odd things like that you can get now and again, but Lightroom's quite good at getting over that. So when you're happy with all of your settings, I also leave the Create Stack selected so that it will stack all of the images, including the one it creates, as one stack. Then I know what has gone into it. So when you're happy with all of that, click on the Merge button. You can see at the top left hand side of my screen here, it's creating the HDR Merge. You could, if it was going to take a long time, carry on and edit something else in the meantime. I know this won't take that long. So now I have my DNG file, so it's used the Adobe digital negative format. So this is effectively still a raw file that you have that you can edit. So if I come into my develop module now, and if we look at the basic panel on the right hand side here, you can see how Lightroom has adjusted this. So it's adjusted the overall exposure, the highlights, the shadows, the whites, the blacks and the contrast. Also the vibrance and the saturation, because one thing about photographing, especially at night, is that you lose colour saturation from things, so you may need to push that up a bit. So in this case, I'm just going to bring the saturation up just a fraction, and then I'll bring the vibrance down because we don't need both. So I'll just tweak that a bit further. You can still here adjust the white balance, and we can bring that down a fraction to make the light a little whiter rather than the artificial light that we have here. And when you're happy with all of that, you can go ahead and export it the same way you would any other image. It just means that you can do so much more without ever having to use a third-party product. And in that respect, Lightroom really is brilliant. I now do all of my HDR merging like this in Lightroom rather than, as I say, any other plugin or indeed in Photoshop. Hopefully you've found this useful. I'm going to be adding more of these videos to both my YouTube channel and to my blog as time goes on. If you've got any suggestions as to particular features you'd like to see covered in Lightroom, just add it in the comments box below. If you want to be notified when I release any more of these, then just click on the subscribe button. And thank you for watching.